Lorena, I will go crazy. Many of us carry a fear of something horrific happening to us in the future. This fear is often revealed in our core complaint. Lorena was 19 years old and was suffering from anxiety and panic attack in social situations. She described feeling of being trapped and not being able to get out whenever she was with friends. She had first noticed the anxiety 3 years ago. Around the same time she had been struggling with a stubborn bladder infection. She recalled going from a doctor to doctor. None of the drugs they prescribed seems to help with the symptom. Lorena described the most terrible part about having a bladder infection. Her worst fear was that no one could help her and that the infections would never go away. The bladder infection eventually did go away, but her anxiety continued to surge. Here is how our conversation unfolded. Mark: and if the bladder infection never went away? Lorena: I would have been. I would be depressed. I would always be good going to doctor. I would be restricted. I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be successful. I would be anxious all the time. I would be a loser. When you hear Lorena's core language, do any words jump out at you? How about the words restricted or loser? Notice how those words want to carry us in a new direction beyond a bladder infection for a moment. Let's suspend any ideas we might have about Lorena and her bladder infection and let the energy of Lorena's words lead us. Lorena was getting closer to her core language, but she was not all the way there yet. In order to help her go deeper, I asked her to describe the worst thing that could happen to someone else. When we hit an impasse while trying to articulate our worst fear, it's often useful to take a few steps back and imagine the worst thing that can happen to someone other than ourselves. Notice what emerged for Lorena. Mark: what's the worst thing that could happen to someone? Someone else, not you. Lorena: they wouldn't be successful, they wouldn't be happy, they wouldn't be able to do the thing they want to do, they would go crazy. They would become like a hermit, they would end up in a mental institution and eventually commit suicide. How about the choice in these words? Go crazy, end up in a mental institution, commit suicide. Now let's put it all together and see what it come up. We have got the loser who is restricted, who goes crazy, and end up in the mental institution, where he or she eventually commits suicide. Maybe you are asking yourself where all this information is coming from. Let's find out. While peeling back in the layer behind her core complaint, Lorena uncovered her deepest fear and plowed squarely into her core sentence. You will learn more about the core sentence in Chapter 8. Lorena's core sentences: I will be a loser, I will go crazy and end up in a mental institution and eventually commit suicide. In the process of following her core language map, Lorena also uncovered a crucial trauma in her family history. Let's open Lorena's family album and let the word of her worst fear lead us. The words of the worst fear can be turned into a family history question that takes us to the next stop on our core language map. I call this type of questions the bridging questions. Lorena's bridging question: was there anyone in your family who was perceived as a loser who ended up in a mental institution and committed suicide? Bullseye. Lorena's grandfather, her mother's father, was disrespected and viewed as the loser in the family. He was in and out of mental institution. He eventually committed suicide while institutionalized. In the next generation, Lorena's aunt, her mother's older sister, had also been rejected in the family as the crazy loser. She too had been in and out of mental institution. The family, embraced by his aunt's behavior, rarely spoke about her. Without admitting it, they had been expecting her to commit suicide like her father. When family members lead to unhappy lives or suffer an extremely difficult fate, it's often easier to reject them than to feel the pain of loving them. Anger is often an easier emotion to feel than sadness. It appears that this was the case in regard to show the family angrily treated his sister. It was easier to reject her than to love her. As we learn in Chapter 3, the fates of family members who are rejected are often repeated. This was the case with the rejected loser grandfather, and in the next generation, the rejected loser aunt. Now Lorena was in line to make it a loser trifecta and extend the pain into a third generation. A suicide in a family can be extremely difficult to grieve. Family members are often angry with the person who has taken his life for living in such a tragic way. What's more, the consequences of the suicide, shame, embarrassment, horrid images, unresolved affair, financial debt, religious uncertainty, are left for the family to deal with. Lorena's fate was looming, but it was not yet set in stone. Once she understood that the fears she carried did not originate with her, she was able to leave them with their rightful owners. I asked her to visualize her grandfather and aunt standing in front of her. Lorena simultaneously expressed genuine feeling of love for them both. She imagined that they were supporting her to be well, and that she could just breathe the anxiety out of her body and send it back to them. She breathed for several minutes, reporting that her body felt lighter and more at peace. She asked them both for their blessings so that she could live a happy life even though they did not have happy life. She could see that it served no purpose to carry their anxiety and that doing so only brought more pain to the family. She promised them both that she would not carry it anymore and imagine a future and serious situation in which she could breathe any residual anxiety back to them. After one session, Lorena was free from the panic that had been consuming her. When I am asked about how the emerging research on neuroplasticity relates to my own clinical experience, I often think of Lorena. Her ability to shift from a predominantly anxious state to one that was more peaceful and balanced was a vivid illustration of the elegant way in which personal family history and present-day awareness can come together. Once key connections are made and we practice focusing on our healing images and experiences, we lay the groundwork for new neural pathway. Healing can then be surprisingly efficient. Core language as a compass. Sometimes, the core language of our current complaint is so compelling it for us to excavate the family burial ground for answer. Yet, often the family history we seek is not readily available. Masked in shame, pushed away in pain, or protected in the form of a family secret, this information is unlikely to be talked about at the dinner table. Sometimes we know the traumatic history behind our issue, we just do not always make the link to our present experiences. The core language of our core complaint can guide us like a compass through generation of unexplained family angst. There, a traumatic event may be waiting to be remembered and explored so that it can finally be laid to rest. The following is a list of questions that can help you unearth some of the core language of your complaint. Answer each question in as much detail as possible. Keep an open mind. Don't edit your responses. The answer to these questions can illuminate a connection between a current issue and a trauma in your family history. Write an exercise 2, 10 questions that generate core language. 1. What was taking place in your life when your symptom or problem first appeared? 2. What was going on right before it started? 3. What age were you when the symptom or problem first appeared? 4. Did something traumatic happen to someone in your family at a similar age? 5. What exactly happened in this problem? 6. What does it feel like in its worst moment? 7. What happens right before you feel this way or have the symptom? 8. What makes it better or worse? 9. What does the problem or symptom keep you from being able to do? What does it force you to? 10. If the feeling or symptom were never to go away, what would be the worst thing that could happen to you? Now read what you have written. Here are some themes I have observed that repeat in families. Do you recognize any of the following themes in your family? Language that repeats. Is there a language that doesn't seem to fit in the context of your life experience? If so, could this language belong to someone in your family? Ages that repeat. Is there a connection between the age you were when your symptom or problem first appeared and the age of a family member when they struggle or suffer? If, for example, you had a parent who died young, you could develop an issue or symptom that limit your life in some way when you reach the same age as your deceased parent. Unconsciously, it might be difficult for you to be happy or live fully beyond the age when her or she died. Your problem or symptom cannot even occur when your child reaches the same age that you were when your parent died. Emotions, behaviors, symptoms that repeat. Think back. What triggered your problem or symptom into motion? What was happening in the background? Did someone leave you? Did you feel distracted, rejected, or abandoned? Did something happen that made you feel like you wanted to give up or quit? Does your issue or symptom mimic or recreate a certain experience or situation from your early childhood? Is it similar in any way to an event in your family history? Does it resemble anything that happened to your mother, father, grandmother, or grandfather? The answer to this question can reveal significant clue to unearthing a family connections. Complaint and symptom as clue for resolutions. What particular quality or essential message is the complaint or symptom attempting to express? When looked at out of the box, your complaint or symptom can be a creative expression leading you to complete something, heal something, integrate something, or separate from something. Perhaps a feeling you have taken on that never belonged to you in the first place. Perhaps your symptom or issue is forcing you to take a step you haven't taken, a step you can no longer ignore. Maybe you are being asked to complete a stage in your development that got interrupted when you were small. Maybe your symptom or issue recreates a state of helplessness that functions to bring you close to your parent, or conversely, maybe your symptom or issues force growth and independence from them. Maybe you are being shown that you need to finish a task or follow a path you abandoned. Maybe you have ignored a young or fragmented part of yourself that expresses a symptom. Maybe you neglected a personal boundary that can no longer remain overlooked. Our symptoms and complaint can also lead us to mend a broken relationship or help us to heal a personal trauma by forcing us to confront feeling we have long ago suppressed. Not only can they give us insight into a family trauma that has never fully resolved, they can also give us insight into personal guilt we carry, perhaps even lighting the path toward reconciliations. Our complaint, symptom, and problem can function as signposts pointing us in the direction of something that is still unresolved. They can help bring something to light that we cannot see or connect us with something or someone we or our family have rejected. When we stop and explore them, what's unresolved can rise to the surface, adding a new dimension to our healing process. We can emerge feeling more whole and complete. Chapter 7 Core Descriptors. The feeling we hold about our parent are a doorway into ourselves. They are also a doorway into the four unconscious terms introduced in the chapter 5, helping us to pinpoint which ones are operating in our life. In this chapter, you will be asked to describe your biological mother and father. In doing so, let yourself be free with your responses. As you move through the following exercise, you are likely to discover more about yourself than about your parent. If you have never met your biological parent, proceed to the next chapter. Describe your mother. Take a moment to describe your mother when you were growing up. What was she like? What adjective or phrases instantly come to mind? Was she warm, loving, cold, distant, happy, sad? Did she hug you a lot or rarely hug you? Grab your notebook and write down your first thought, the first word that come to mind. Write an exercise 3, describing your mother. My mother was warm. Also write down what you blame her for. I blame my mother for being, write everything down. Do not do this in your head. It's essentially that you write down the words as they come to you. Describe your father. Now do the same thing for your father. How would you describe him? Was he kind? Easygoing? Harsh? Critical? Was he involved or not involved? Write everything down. Resist the impulse to add it. Write an exercise for describing your father. My father was. Also write down what you blame for him. I blame my father for. Write an exercise 5, describing your partner, close friend, or boss. My partner, close friend, or boss is. I blame him or her for. While you are in the flow, you might even want to describe your romantic partner if you have one, or a close friend, or even your boss. Now let's take a look at what has just been revealed in your writing. I call this spontaneous off the cuff. Adjective and phrases core descriptors. These descriptors are a doorway into our unconscious feeling. They can reveal feeling about our parents that we might not even be aware we hold. Writing down an impromptu list of adjectives and phrases gives us the opportunity to bypass the adult rationalized, refined version of our childhood story. In this writing, our true attitudes can emerge devoid of the usual filters and censors. This list can put us in touch with unconscious loyalty and allegiance we share with our parent. What's more, it can reveal how we have rejected one or both of our parents and or how we have adopted the very behavior we judge as negative in them. These descriptors don't lie because they come from an inner image we carry, an image we formed long ago, perhaps to protect ourselves from feeling hurt. When we were small, our body functioned as recorder chronically the information we took in and storing it as feeling states. The adjectives take us back into these feeling states and the images that accompany them. The adjectives are significant because they highlight old images that prevent us from moving forward. Many of us hold images that are painful, images of our parent not giving us enough, images of not getting what we needed. Unchecked, these inner images can direct the course of our life, forming a blueprint for how our life will continue. These images are also incomplete. An essential truth is missing. What traumatic event lurked behind these images that were powerful enough to derail the flow of love in our family? Now look at the words you have written. Are there resentment you still hold towards your parent? Are there accusation? If so, you may already have experienced that the very complaint you hold against your parent are the same complaint that you experience with your partner or with your close friend. Often, our discontent toward our parent gets projected onto our partner or show up in our close friendship. What is unresolved with our parent does not automatically disappear. It serves as a template that forges our later relationship. If we had a difficult relationship with our parent, our core descriptor will expose the resentment we are still harboring. When we are resentful, it erodes our inner peace. Those of us who feel that we didn't receive enough from our parent, especially from our mother, often feel that we don't receive enough from life. When we have had a close relationship with our parents, our core descriptor reveals the warmth and compassion we feel toward them. When we feel positive toward our parents, we tend to feel positive about life and trust that good things will continue to come our way. Sometimes our core descriptors reveal mixed feeling. In most cases, people hold disparate feeling toward their parent, yet one of them or essential trait of core language often stands out or as unresolved. And this is what we are looking for. For some of us, the action of our parents are still felt as personal attack or rejection. Look at the way these two sisters, each with different childhood experiences, describe their mother. First sister, lonely, sad, frustrated, strict, violent. She had a bad temper. Second sister, cruel, vindictive, and emotionally abusive. In the word of the first sister, the description of the mother is merely stated as truth. In the second system description, her pain has not been resolved, and it's still carried in the form of blame and judgment toward her mother. To this sister, the action of the mother are felt as intentionally directed toward her. She feels singled out, whereas the first sister is stating fact. A mother can be violent and have a bad temper, and we can still be at peace with her. The second sister, who sees her mother as intentionally cruel, is clearly not at peace with her mother. One can only imagine how differently these two sisters experience life, although they share the same order. Each sister carried the personal version of the mother inside her. The second sister experienced her life as cruel and abusive. She felt emotionally drained and unsupported, and was alone much of the time. Sometimes we are able to feel love in front of our parent and not the other. Kim, who preferred her father to her mother, complained that her mother was infantile like a little girl. I could never count on her for anything. In contrast, her core description about her father were glowing. That was wonderful. We did everything together. I could always go to him for a comfort and care. He should have left my mother a long time ago. He never got the love he needed from her. Beneath the surface of Kim's resentment toward her mother, church a sea of heart. Add to this feeling betrayal in wishing that her mother would be loved by her father. Kim's emptiness and disconnectedness permeated her core language. When we pit one parent against the other, we go against the source of our own existence and unconsciously create a rift inside ourselves. We forget that half of us comes from our mother and half from our father. Kim's resentment served only a fuel, her self-loathing and inner unrest. It was a prison from which her only escape was self-awareness. Many of us have become fixated on something we believe our parents have done to us that has spoiled our life. We have allowed these memories, whether accurate or distorted, to override the good thing that our parents gave to us. Parents in the course of being parent inadvertently cause their children pain. It's inevitable. The problem is not what our parents have done to us. The problem is how we are still holding on to it. Generally, when our parent caused us harm, it was unintentional. All of us feel that. There are the things we didn't get from our parents, but being at peace with our parents means that we are at peace with what we did receive as well as we did not receive. When we hold that was given in His light, we can gain strength from our parents who, even if they couldn't always show it, wanted only the best for us. Common core descriptor from an early break in the bond. Yet there are many of us who have experienced an early separation or a break in the bond with our mother and struggle to find peace, the feeling that solid ground beneath for our feet. The following are some common core descriptor from people who experienced an early disconnections from their mothers. Mom was cold and distant. She never helped me. I didn't trust her at all. My mother was too busy for me. She never had any time for me. My mom and I are really close. She will like my sisters. I take care for. I don't ever want to be a burden to my mom. My mother was distant, emotionally unavailable, and critical. She would always push me away. She doesn't really care about me. We really don't have a relationship. I felt much closer to my grandmother. She was the one who mothered me. My mother is completely self-centered. It's all about her. She never showed me any love. She can be very calculating and manipulative. I didn't feel safe with her. I was scared of her. I never knew what was going to happen next. I'm not close with her. She's not maternal, not like a mother. I've never wanted the children. I have never had the maternal feeling inside me. Can you hear the pain in these core descriptors? We will explore in detail the core language of separation and how to rebuild our relationship with our mothers. It's important to note that not everyone who has experienced a break in the early bond will be resentful toward his or her mother. Often the mother is deeply loved and trusted. Sometimes after such a break, the child unknowingly shuts down to receiving a mother's nurturance and instead attempts to take care of the mother's as way of bonding with her. Sometimes the break occurs so early in life that there is no cognitive memory of the experience. Body memory of the separation can be triggered, however, when bonding or distancing is experienced in relationship without ever understanding why, we can feel overwhelmed by feeling of error, disassociation, numbness, disconnection, defeat, and annihilations. The emotional charge in the core descriptor. The emotional charge contained in your core descriptor can function like a barometer to gauge the healing that still needs to take place. Generally, the stronger the negative charge, the clearer the direction for healing. You are looking for words that contain a significant emotional charge. Feel the emotional charge in these words, spoken by a 27-year-old man describing his alcoholic father. My father is drunk. He is totally useless. He is an idiot and complete loser. He was never there for my mother or for us kids. He was abusive and violent toward her. I have absolutely no respect for him. Underneath words like drunk and useless, underneath idiot and loser, you can feel the son's heart. The boy's anger and numbness are only the top layer. Anger and numbness are much easier to feel than sadness and pain. At his core, the son likely to feel devastated whenever he sees his father drinking. You can also sense his mother feeling toward his father in the following word. He was never there for my mother, for us kids. These words, useless and never there for us, were probably his mother's word. That she had shut down to her husband made it almost impossible for her son to be open to him. The son appeared to be loyal to his mother on the surface, but in reality, he actually shared his father's plight. He drank like his father and reached at his girlfriend until she kicked him out, just as his mother had kicked his father out. In this way, the son unwittingly wove a subterranean thread that tied him to his father. He made sure that he wouldn't have more in life than his father had until the relationship between them healed. He repeated his father's suffering with his father back in his life. He was freer to make healthier choices. When a parent is rejected or disrespected, one of the children will often represent that parent by sharing the rejected behaviors. In this way, the child makes himself or herself equal to the parent by suffering in a similar way. It is as though the child is saying, I will go through it too, so that you don't have to go through it alone. Loyal in this way, the child continues to suffer into the next generation. It often does not stop there. It is essential that we make peace with our parents. Doing so not only brings us inner peace, it also allows for harmony to spread into generations that follow. By softening toward our parent and dropping the story that stands in the way, we are more likely to halt this senseless repetition of generational suffering. While at first this might seem challenging, I have witnessed again and again the unexpected reward of healing our connections with our parent, including experiencing positive outcomes in our health, relationship, and productivity. Shifting your inner image of your parent. Read your call description again, this time read them out loud. Listen what? With the new ears, do you hear anything new? Do the emotionally charged words indicate that you still have unresolved feeling toward your parent? Feel your body as you read the descriptor. Does your body tighten or relax? How about your breath? Is it flowing or stuck? Notice if there is anything inside you that wants to shift. Your core descriptors are a valuable step in rebuilding your relationship with your parent. It makes no difference whether your parents are living or have passed away. What you describe your core descriptor, the negative feeling, attitude, judgment you hold toward your parent can finally shift. Remember, the greater the emotional charge in your word, the deeper your pain, that there is often sadness hibernating beneath your angry words. The sadness won't kill you, the anger actually might. The image you have of your parent can affect the quality of the life you live, and the good news is that the inner image, once revealed, can change. You cannot change your parent, but you can change the way you hold them inside you. Chapter 8. The Core Sentence. If you struggle with a fear, phobia, panic attack, or obsessive thoughts, you know only too well what it feels like to be held captive in the prison of your inner life. The hard time you do inside yourself, the constant worry, the overwhelming emotion, the unnerving body sensation can feel like a life sentence, yet no trial or conviction has ever taken place. Fear and anxiety strain your world and drain your vitality, restricting the day in front of you and limiting the life ahead of you. It can be exhausting to live that way. Finding a way out is simpler than you think. You just need to do time with a different kind of life sentence. The sentence that your worst fear creates. The sentence had probably been with you since you were a small child, whether spoken aloud or said silently. These sentences deepens your despair, yet at the same time, it can lead you out beyond your prison gates into a new world of understanding and resolution. This sentence is called your core sentence. If the core language map is a tool for locating buried treasure, the core sentence is the diamond you find when you get there. Finding your core sentence. Before we go further, answer this question and write down your answer. What is your worst fear? The worst thing that could ever happen to you. It's probably a fear, a feeling you have had your whole life. You might even feel as though you were born with it. Here is the question again, asked in a slightly different way. If your life were to fall apart, if things were to go terribly wrong, what's your worst fear? What's the worst fear? What the worst thing that could happen to you? Write down your answer. Write an exercise 6 identifying your core sentence. My worst fear, the worst thing that could happen to me is... What you have to write is your core sentence. Don't read further until you have written it down. Maybe your core sentence begins with the word I will lose everything. Maybe it begins with the word they will destroy me. Maybe your core sentence begins with the word my children, my family, my wife, my husband will leave me. A core sentence can begin with a number of other words as well. Now let's go deeper and answer the same question again. This time don't edit, keep writing until you have gone as far as you can go. The answer to this question initiates a process of self-discovery that will continue to deepen in the pages that follow. Now look at what you have written. If you think you have reached the button as yourself, one more question, and if that happened, then what? What would be the worst part of that? For example, if you wrote the sentence, I could die, take it a bit further, and if that happened, what would be the worst part of that? My family will be without me. Go one more level down, and what would be the worst part of that? They will forget me. Can you feel how the sentence "they will forget me" has a bit more juice than the previous two sentences? Take another moment to narrow down and deepen in the emotional resonance of your core sentence. Write an exercise 8, deepening your core sentence. My absolute worst fear is... Now let's look again at the words you have written. Your core sentence probably contains 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 words. As we mentioned earlier, it is frequently an I or the a day sentence, but it can start with the other word as well. Often it's a sentence that's stated in the present or future tense, as though either it's happening right now or just about to happen. The words feel alive inside you. They resonate in your body when spoken aloud. When the core sentence is on target, it hits more like a ping on crystal than a thought on wood. Core sentence sounds like this. I am alone. They reject me. They'll leave me. I'll let them down. I will lose everything. I will fall apart. It's all my fault. They abandon me. They betray me. They humiliate me. I will go crazy. I will hurt my child. I will lose my family. I will lose control. I will do something terrible. I will hurt someone I won't deserve to live. I will be hated. I will kill myself. They will lock me up. They will put me away. It will never end. Fine-tuning your core sentence. There is one more step. If you write down a sentence like I am all alone, it's the dial in the both direction to make sure your core sentence pings at its highest possible frequency. For example, is your sentence I'm all alone, or is it more like they leave me? Is it they leave me, or is it more like they reject me or they abandon me? The same way your optician check and double check your vision for your prescription, you are checking to make sure the words align exactly with the feeling inside you. Keep testing it. Is your core sentence more like did they abandon me, or more like I am abandoned? Your body will know which words are best by the vibration that's created inside you. The words of your core sentence create a physical reaction of an anxious or sinking feeling when the right words are spoken. Are the path to finding your core sentence. If you try to write your core sentence and nothing comes to you, then answer these questions. What's the worst thing that could happen to someone else, not you? Perhaps you remember a new story of something terrible that happened to somebody you didn't know, or maybe something awful happened to somebody you did know. What happened to them? Write it down. What you remember is important. It may even say something about you. Many times, another tragedy reflects a facet of our own worst fear of the myriad painful images around us. Those that strike a familiar chord, or to be more exact, a familiar chord tend to resonate with us. Call it a backdoor into the family's physique. Of all the terrible things that happen to people, the one that strikes us as the most terrible will most likely link to a traumatic event in our family system. It can also remind us of a trauma we personally experienced when another tragedy resonates with us. There is generally something about the tragedy that belongs to us on some level. There is even another way to get to your core sentence. Think of the scene from a book, movie, or play that deeply affected you. What part of that scene affects you the most? If, for example, a story of children who are all alone without their mothers resonates with you, what part of the story stirred the greatest emotion in you? Is it the fact that a mother has left her children, or is it the fact that the children are left alone and have no one to take care of them? This family story can resonate with two people, but one person might be affected more by the idea of the mother leaving her kids, and the other person might be affected more by the image of children who have no one to take care of them. Were we to look in the family system of the first person, the one who cannot bear the thought of a mother leaving her children, we might find a member of her own family, maybe her mother or grandmother, maybe even she herself, who left children or gave up a child. An unacknowledged guilt might resonate in the family system of the first person, whereas the deep grief of a child who has been abandoned may infuse the family system of the second person. Images from the books, movies, and plays that hold an emotional charge for us can be like storms rattling the two delicate fruits hidden in the recesses of our family tree. When a new story becomes our family story, for as long as she could remember, Pam had the fear that strangers would break into her home and violently harm her. Until recently, this fear for hand in the background like the drone of a distant machine. Then she read the newspaper story about a young Somalian boy who was beaten to death by the gang of boys in her city. The feed that had been vibrating on low was now cranked up too high and Lizzie Nectarian, a panic inside her body, palm felt like she was coming apart at the seams and described the sensation like she was floating outside the hard body. He was just a child, she said. He was innocent. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They took away his life, his dignity. They made him suffer. And back nods to Pam, she was also talking about her mother's older brother Walter, who died when he was 11. Pam had heard the story only once, when she was a small child. The family rarely spoke of it, although it was never proven. The family suspected foul play. Lured out of his foes by the neighborhood kids who frequently teased him, Walter was found dead at the bottom of an abandoned mine shaft. He either fell or was pushed and was left to die. It was the day before his body was recovered. The boys must have panicked and run off. Walter had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Core language born out of war. When our family member has suffered, perished, and perpetrated violence in the war, we can inherit a virtual minefield of trauma, non-consciously making the link that we are reliving traumatic experiences from decades ago. We can become heir to fears, as though the feeling belonged to us. In my families that have experienced tragic or painful event, the past tends to stay buried. Parent thinking it's best to not expose the children to unnecessary pain. Often keep their lips at the doorway to the past, tightly sealed. The less the child knows, they think the more protected, the more insulated their child remain. Breck knew nothing about the killing fields, nothing about the murder, and the worst of all, nothing about her paternal grandfather. In fact, he was told that his grandmother's second husband was his real grandfather. Unfortunately, remaining silent about the past does little to immunize the next generation. What's hidden from sight and mind seldom disappears. Conversely, it often reappears in the behavior and symptoms of our children. Explaining this concept to Reed and Sita was not easy. It was a cultural feel, a sort of denial forbade any discussion of the genocide. We only look forward, not at the past. We are lucky to have survived and to be in America. It was until I explained how the past had apparently come alive in Park's suffering and that Rita and Sita were ready to take the next step. Go home and tell Park about your father. Tell him how much you love him and how much you still miss him. Place a photo of your father, his real grandfather, over his bed and tell him that your dad protect him and bless his hand at night while he sleeps. Give him the image that with your dad blessing him, his dad does not have to be hurt anymore. The last step was the most difficult to impart. It appeared to me that Park had identified not only with his grandfather but also with the killer who struck the murderous blow. I explained to Sita and Rita how does who hurt our family member belong in our family system and that we can become identified with them when they are expunged from our awareness. I explained how the children of both perpetrators and victims suffer similarly and that we must hold feeling of goodwill toward all involved. Going a step further is support our children and their children when we can pray equally for those who harm our family member and for those who our family member have harmed. Family pain, family silence. Gretchen, whom you met earlier in this book, carried the anxious feeling of her grandmother, the lone survivor of a family who perished at Auschwitz. Unable to fully receive the gift of having survived the Holocaust, Gretchen's grandmother walked through life like a ghost, while her children and grandchildren walked on eggshells around her so as not to distress her father. Talking about her dead family was not a conversation you could have with her. Her eyes would glaze over, the color in her cheeks would fade. It was best to leave her memories folded. Perhaps grandmother felt an unconscious desire to die like the rest of her family. 2 generations later, Gretchen would inherit this feeling and carry an image of wanting to be incinerated like her grandmother's family. Gretchen's core language, I'm going to vaporize myself, my body will incinerate in second. Once she recognized that, She had been entangled with her grandmother's trauma. Gretchen finally had a context within which to understand the feelings she carried. I invited her to close her eyes and visualize being cradled by her grandmother and all the Jewish family members she would never known. In the experience of that comforting image, Gretchen reported feeling peaceful, a feeling she said had been unfamiliar to her. She realized that her wish to incinerate herself was connected to this relative who literally had been incinerated. In that moment, the impulse to kill herself dissipated. She no longer felt the need to die. While Gretchen was identified with her grandmother, she also may have been identified with the murderer who killed her grandmother's family. By killing herself, Gretchen would have been unconsciously reenacting the aggression of the killers. Such identification with perpetrators are not usual and need to be considered with the violent behaviors of observed in family members in later generations. Presence of fear. Steve struggled with panic attacks whenever he visited a new place. It didn't matter whether he was entering a new building, trying out a new restaurant, or traveling to a new town. Steve would dissociate whenever he found himself in unfamiliar surroundings. He described the sensation of passing out, a feeling of dizziness that made him go black inside and feeling like the sky was closing in on him. Along with this sensation would be the racing heart and intense waiting he experienced time and time again. He could think of nothing in his childhood that could have created fears this extreme. In an attempt to keep him feeling safe, his wife, kids, and remaining present with him in the constancy of familiar territory. There was no vacation, no new restaurant, no surprise. Stiff core language. I will disappear, I will be wiped out. A look into Steve's family history revealed the source of his lack of safety. 74 members of his family perished in the Holocaust. They were literally taken from the familiar surrounding of their homes and the village in which they had lived their entire life and moved on to a new place, a concentration camp, where they were systematically murdered. Once realizing the connection he shared with his family members, Steve found the context for the panic attack that had been limiting his life. After meditation, the fear lifted, embracing a new inner image of his relative at peace and blessing him to be free. Steve opened the barbed wire gates of his old life and walked into a new life filled with exploration and adventure. Not unlike Steve, Linda had a panic attack that kept her from feeling safe. She kept herself locked in a prison of fear. The world is not a safe place, she said. You have to hide who you are. If people find out too much about you, they can hurt you. For as long as she could remember, she would have nightmares for being kidnapped by a stranger. As a child, she remembered never wanting to sleep at her friends' houses. Even in her 40s, Linda really went everywhere. Linda, like Steve, lived in a prison gate, that by fears that she couldn't attach to any event in her childhood. When I asked about her family history, she remembered a story she had heard as a little girl about her grandmother's sister, who was killed in the Holocaust. Researching what happened, Linda discovered that her great aunt lived hidden in a neighbor's home until someone outside the home found out that she was a Jew. The sister was then kidnapped by a stranger, Nazi soldier, and shot dead in a ditch. Linda's core language. The world is not a safe place. You have to hide who you are. People can hurt you. By comparing her own core language with her great aunt's tragedy, Linda now had the context for her and Steve's feeling. She imagined having a conversation with her aunt in which her aunt offered to protect her and help her feel safe. In this new image, Linda felt that she could live the ensued feeling back with her aunt, where they originated. While many of us do not have family members who died or participated in the Holocaust, are the Armenian genocide, the killing field of Cambodia, the Ukraine famine imposed by Stalin, the mass killing in China, Rwanda and Nigeria, El Salvador, the former Yugoslavia, the residues of war, violence, murder, rape, oppression, exile, forced relocation, and other such trauma that our ancestors did endure can infuse the many fears and anxiety we believe originate with us. Our core sentence can be the link that allows us to ferret out what's past from what's now. Excavating the origin of your core sentence. The core sentence often invokes feeling and sensation of fear. Just by speaking its word, we can observe a strong physical reaction in our bodies. Many people report wave of sensation reverberating inside them as the sentence is spoken. That's because the core sentence arises from an unresolved tragedy. If not ours, then the question is whose? We may be the ones speaking in the core sentence and carrying it finished, but the original fear can stem from a tragic event that took place long before we were even born. The question we ask is, to whom does the initial fear belong? Say your core sentence to yourself, feel its vibration inside, listen inwardly, imagine for a moment that the words belong to someone else. You might even want to write your core sentence down again to see the words in front of you. Hear the sentence of someone who experienced a great trauma, or carried deep grief, or guilt, or died violently, or regretfully, or lived a life of emptiness or quiet desperation. This sentence could be the sentence of your mother or your father. It could belong to your grandmother or grandfather, or even to your sibling, or to an uncle or aunt. And now it's live on you. Core sentences are like traveling sentences, much like traveling salesmen who knock on doors after doors until someone let them in. But the doors they solicit are the physic of those who follow in a family system, and the invitation to enter is without conscious permission. We appear to share an unconscious obligation to resolve the tragedies of our family's past. In an unconscious attempt to heal the family pain, you might share your grandmother's unresolved grief surrounding the death to her mother or husband or child. Her feeling of "I have lost everything" may live inside you as a fear that you too will lose everything. The sentences affect the way you know yourself. They affect the choices you make. They affect how your mind and body respond to the world around you. Imagine the effect of a sentence like "how he will leave me" playing out in the back of your awareness when the man of your dreams propose. Or consider the impact of the sentence like "I will hurt my child" on the complex biological and emotional state of a young mother-to-be. Listen again to the words of your core sentence. Speak them aloud. Are you sure they are your words? Who in your family might have had cause to feel the same way? Think of your parents and your grandparents. They did experience an event so painfully that they rarely spoke about it. Did they lose a newborn baby or miscarry late in a pregnancy? Were they abandoned by a great lover? Or did they lose a parent or sibling when they were young? Did they feel guilty for causing harm to someone? Did they blame themselves for something? If nothing comes to mind, you might even look back another generation to your great-great-grandparents or that uncle or aunt. Zack had to go back 2 generations to find peace. He was lucky to be alive after several suicide attempts. He finally decided to open the door to his family's past. Zack's core sentence had been with him for as far back as he could remember. Ever since he was a small boy, he felt that he needed to die. He had been born into this life to die. He said, "Zah," core sentence, "I need to die." And so when Zah was old enough to do so, he signed up to fight and die in Iraq. Nothing could be simpler. As an infantryman, he would be gunned down on the front line of a battle and die, thus fulfilling his life purpose. He trained diligently. He would be a hero. He would take a huge risk. He would die with honor for his country. But Zah's plans went awry. His unit was not deployed. They remained set stateside. Zah was incredulous. He immediately won a wall from the base and put a second plan to die into action. He drove down the highway at turbo speed, certain that the trooper would pull him over. He had it carefully planned out. He would leap out of his car and go for the trooper guns, and instant it would be all over. The trooper would be forced to shoot him and Zach could die. He raced on the highway just as he had planned. Again, Fate intervened. Nothing happened. There was no state trooper, no shooting, no dying. Undeterred, Zah drove straight to Washington, D.C. His third plan surely couldn't fail. He would leap over the White House fence and, with a toy gun in hand, sprint toward the president's office. Certainly he would be shot the by Secret Service again as he ran, but yet again, Fate had opened plans for Zah. When he got to Pennsylvania Avenue, the fence was so well protected by security agents, he couldn't get within several feet on feet. Zach had one more suicide plan in mind. This one never materialized. He would attend a political rally where the governor was speaking. Zach would parentage the toy gun and aim it at the governor. Surely security agent would have to shoot him dead. Then a sobering thought occurred to him. In the thick of the crowd, he might only be wrestled to the ground and spend the rest of his life in a prison. Desperate, he took sleep. He sought help. In that case, can you hear a common thread in each of his plans to die? It's suicide at the time, it's successful, would have resulted in his being shot to death by someone defending his or her country. Yet, Zach, in his 24 years of life, had done nothing that would warrant such a punishment. He had never harmed anyone. He carried no personal guilt. He didn't blame himself for anyone's suffering. From whom then did Zah need to die? To put it more precisely, who in his family system needed to be shot for something he had done? For this we had to travel back into Zah's family's history. His core sentence led the way. Given Zah's core complaint, there were three possible bridging questions. Zah bridging questions. Who is your family committed a crime and was never punished for it? Who felt like he needed to be shot for something he did? Well, who was shot in your family that the family couldn't grieve? Either of the first two questions would have hit the bullseye. In Zah's case, the first question sparked a memory of conversation he had overheard as a child. Zah's grandfather, his mother's father, was a high official in Mussolini's cabinet who had been responsible for decisions that led to the death of many people. As the war in Italy was ending, he managed to force fake documents, change in his identity, and escape to the United States. Those in his cabinet who remained were rounded up and shot to death by a firing squad. Zah's grandfather had circumvented his fate. He was lucky, or so he had thought. Unbeknownst to him, his fate would pass down to the firstborn boy in the family to his grandson. As we learn, Bert Hellinger teaches that each of us is solely responsible for our fate, and that each of us alone must carry the consequences of the fate. If we avoid or reject or circumvent that fate, another member of our system could attempt to pay the price, often with his own or her own life. Zah has been attempting to pay for the crimes of his grandfather. It was his costly inheritance, and Zah had no conscious awareness that he was taking it on. He thought that the urge to be shot to death had originated in him. He thought that he had been born defective, and that's just how things were. He never considered that he could be affected so deeply by his family history. He had never made the link. You mean it's not me who needs to die? Zah was stunned. You mean I don't have to die? By dodging his death by the firing squad, Zah's grandfather never balanced the death he had caused. 2 generations later, Zah hold the time to even a score by atoning with his own life. It was not fair, but it was happening, and Zah almost succeeded. Instead, Zah was able to live the feeling of needing to die with his grandfather. Just having a place to put them with was huge for him. For the first time, he could separate feelings that were not his from those that were what had once been internalized, could now sit on the periphery. When the old feeling rose, Zah had the conscious plan. He would kiss his grandfather in his mind's eye, and bow his head respectfully. He would hear his grandfather telling him that he needed to die along with him, and that he would deal with it, and that Zah could just breathe in and out and be at peace. Zah imagined his grandfather and the afterlife making amends to the people he had harmed. In Zah's inner image, the whole landscape began to take on a peaceful quality of reconciliation. Like Zah, you probably never thought your link to your current issue to the traumatic event in your family history. Now with the core sentence, you have a way to do so. Say your core sentence one more time and ask yourself these 2 questions. Are you sure this fear originates with you? Is there someone in your family system who had cause to feel the same way? Even if you don't have any information about your family's past, the path toward healing is still straightforward. You have already done the hard part. You have isolated your deepest fear, although you might carry the feeling of that fear, and the fear itself likely originates in a traumatic event that occurred before you were born, an event that sits behind the suffering of one of your parents. And even if you don't know what it is, you can tell it's there. You feel it. Acknowledging the family members behind your core sentence. If you have a clear idea of the original owner of the fear expressed in your core sentence, visualize that person now. If you are not clear who this person is, close your eyes, imagine somebody in your family who might have felt similar emotion. This person might be your uncle or your grandmother or even the older half-sibling you never met. You don't have to know who it is. This person might not even be the blood member of your family, but may have harmed someone or been harmed by someone in your family. Visualize the person or people connected to the traumatic event behind your core sentence. You don't even need to know what that event is. Now bow your head and breathe deeply through your open mouth. Tell this person or these people that you respect them and all that happened to them. Tell them that they will not to be forgotten and that they will be remembered with love. Visualize them with being at peace. Feel them blessing you to have a full life. Feel their well wishes having a physical effect in your body as you breathe in, as you breathe out. Feel the emotion of your core sentence leaving your body. Feel the fear dissipating as though the intensity dial was turned all the way down to zero. Do this for several minutes until your body quiets. Your core sentence, the path to transforming fear, are of all the core language tool you learn in this book. The sentence that describes your worst fear, your core sentence is the most direct path to uncovering the unresolved family trauma. The core sentence not only guides you the source of your fear, but also connects you to the feeling of unresolved family trauma that may still live in your body. With the source of insight, that fear can begin to live. Here are the 10 key attributes of the core sentence. 1. It often linked to a traumatic event in your family history or in childhood. 2. It frequently begins with an I or they sentence. 3. It has very few words, yet it's dramatic. 4. It contains the emotional charged language of your greatest fear. 5. It causes physical reaction when it's spoken. 6. It can retrieve the lost language of a trauma and locate where this language originated in your family history. 7. It can recover trauma memories that could not be integrated. 8. It can provide you with the context for understanding the emotion, sensation, and symptom you have been experiencing. 9. It targets the cause, not the symptom. 10. It has the power, when spoken, and to release you from the past. In the next chapter, you will learn to construct your family tree to find the core trauma connected to your core sentence. Before we go there, let's lay out your core language map one more time. You have now gathered all the core language you need to take you to the fourth and final step, how to uncover the core trauma in your family. Read an exercise 9. Construct your core language map. Write down your core complaint. Here is an example of a core complaint from Mary, whose older brother died stillborn and was never named or talked about. I don't fit in. I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I'm invisible. Nobody sees me. I feel like I'm observing life but not in it. 2. Write down your core descriptor about your mother and your father. Here are Mary's core descriptor. My mom was kind, fragile, caring, depressed, preoccupied, and vacant. I blame her for not being there for me. I felt like I had to take care of her. Dad was funny, lonely, distant, away a lot, and hardworking. I blame him for not being around. 3. Write down your core sentence. Your fourth fear. Here is Mary words. I will always feel alone and laugh out. Chapter 9. The core trauma. Let's put all the pieces of our core language map together. So far, we have learned to extract the core language games from our core complaint. We have also learned to analyze our core descriptor, how the adjective we use to describe our parent often say more about us than they do about them. We have also learned that the sentence that expresses our greatest fear, our core sentence, can lead us back to the trauma in our family system. The last thing we need to learn is how to construct a bridge to get to our core trauma, the unresolved trauma in the childhood or in the family history. In sequence, the 4 tools of the core language map are the core complaint, the core descriptor, the core sentence, the core trauma. There are 2 ways to underneath the core trauma. One is through a genogram, a diagram of a family tree. The other is through a bridging questions. The bridging questions. As we learned from Shah in the last chapter, one way to get the underlying trauma is to ask the bridging questions. A bridging question can summon forward the family member from whom we have inherited our core sentence. Because our core sentence can originate in the past generation, locating the rightful owner can bring about peace and understanding, not only for us but for our children as well. In Zahka's case, the bridging question, who in our family committed the crime and was never punished for it, led us to his grandfather, who, as a powerful official in Mussolini government, harmed many people. As you can imagine, people in Zach family rarely, if ever, spoke about what the grandfather did during the war. Simply put, a bridging question is not a question that connects the present to the past. Activating the feeling of your greatest fear can lead you to the person in your family system who can cause to feel the same way you do. For example, if your greatest fear is that you might harm a child, turn that fear into a question. Think about all the relevant combinations that could express in a fear carried by a descendant in a family. The fear 1. I could harm a child. Possible bridging questions. Who in your family system might have blamed himself or herself for hurting a child or not keeping a child safe? Who might have helped himself or herself responsible for a child's death, who may have felt guilty for action or decision that harm a child, what child in your family system was harmed, neglected, given away, or mistreated. One of more of this question is likely to lead you to the source of your fear. However, the source may not always be readily available. Many parents and grandparents keep the family past tightly sealed, and thus valuable information can be lost forever. When people suffer deeply, they often attempt to distance themselves from their emotional pain by avoiding it. In this way, they think that they are protecting themselves and protecting their children, ignoring the pain actually depends it. What is hidden from sight often increases intensity. Remaining silent about family pain is rarely an effective strategy for healing it. The suffering will surface again at a later time, often expressing fears of symptoms of a later generation. Even if you can't find out what happened in your family, you can still complete your core language map. Your core sentence will provide you with the clues you need to point you in the direction of the family drama. Your bridging questions will connect enough the dots, even if the specific detail are missing. Lisa's story. Lisa described herself as an overprotective mother. She was terrified that something terrible would happen to one of her children, so never let them out of her sight. Even though nothing significant had ever happened to and of any Lisa's three children, she was haunted by her core sentence, "My child will die." Lisa knew very little of her family's story, but when she followed the fear of her core sentence, she asked the following bridging questions. Who in the family had a child who died? Who in the family could not keep his or her child safe? The only information Lisa had was that her grandparent came to America from the Carpathian mountain region of Ukraine, fleeing famine and starvation. Her grandparents never spoke about the hardship they were endured. The children knew never to ask. Lisa's mother was the youngest of the children, that the only one who was born in America. Although Lisa's mother was not sure of the details, she suspected that some of the children didn't survive the journey. To bring in this information, the like increased Lisa's understanding of the fear she carried. She recognized that the sentence "my child will die" most likely belonged to her grandparent. Making this link immediately reduced the intensity of her fear. Lisa was able to worry less and enjoy her children more. When you ask your bridging questions, you could confront a traumatic event in your family that has never been fully resolved. You could find yourself standing face to face with a family member who suffered terribly. You can be carrying the fallout. A bridging question is one way to discover the unresolved trauma in your family. Mapping out your family tree and constructing a genogram on paper is another. The genogram. A genogram is a two-dimensional visual representation of a family tree. Here are the steps to create yours. 1. Looking back 3 or 4 generations in your family. Construct a diagram and include your parent, grandfather, grandparent, great-grandparents, sibling, uncle, aunts. You don't need to go back any farther than your great-grandparents. Using square to represent male and circle to represent female, create your family tree. You can use lines to represent the branches of the family tree, showing who belong in which generation. List the children of your parent, grandparent, and great-grandparent. You don't need to list the children of your aunts, uncle, or sibling. However you map this out will be fine. Next to each family member, write down the significant trauma and difficult fates that person experienced. If your parents are still alive, you might ask them what they know. Don't worry if they are answer you can't get. Whatever you know, it should be enough. Traumatic events include who died early, who left, who was abandoned or isolated or excluded from the family, who was adopted or gave a child up for adoption, who died in a childbirth, who had a stillbirth or an abortion, who committed a suicide, who committed a crime, who experienced a significant trauma, who was forgotten or suffered in war, who died in the participated in Holocaust or some other genocide, who was murdered, who murdered someone, who felt responsible for someone's death or misfortune. These questions are important. If someone in your family harmed or murdered someone, list the harmed or murdered person in your family tree. The victim harmed by people in your family must be included, as they are no member of your family system with whom you could be identified. Likewise, list anyone who harmed or murdered a member of your family, as you can also Be unconsciously identified with this person, keep going, who profited from another's loss, who was wrongly accused of something, who was jailed or institutionalized, who had a physical, emotional, or mental disability, which parent or grandparent had a significant relationship prior or getting married, and what happened. List any former partner of your parent and grandparent, list anyone else you can think of who was deeply hurt by someone or deeply hurt another. 3. At the top of the genogram, write down your core sentence. Now look at everyone who belongs in your family system, who might have had a reason to feel the same way you do. This person could be your mother or your father, especially if one of them had a difficult fate or was disrespected by the other. It could also be the sister of your grandmother who was institutionalized, or the older brother that your mother miscarried before she had you. Often it's someone who is not talked about much in your family. Take a look at the following example. This genogram tells the story of a few women named Ellie who struggled with the fear of going crazy until she constructed the material line of her genogram. Ellie believed that she was the source of the fear. Core sentence: I will go crazy. Great-grandfather, great-grandmother, at 18 as she accidentally started a fire that killed her newborn infant. Grandmother's older sibling died in a fire as a baby. Grandmother's sister, mental illness institutionalized at 18 years old, died in a confinement. Grandfather, grandmother, won't talk about her family. Father, mother, post-tantrum depression. Ellie, feelings of I will go crazy since age 18. In the genogram, it's easy to see the feeling of going crazy did not originate in the current generations with Ellie. Ellie's great aunt was institutionalized at 18 and died alone and forgotten. No one in the family ever spoke her name or told her story. Ellie never even knew that her grandmother had any sibling and discovered the information only through repeated inquiries. Interestingly, the great aunt was committed to the state hospital at 18, the same age the great-grandmother was when she started a fire that killed her newborn child. With the third generation in view, a new understanding for Ellie was possible. Whose feeling of insanity had the great-aunt been reliving? And the more important story was Ellie trying to bring back to the forgotten by sharing the same fear. With the chronogram laid out, the full history of Ellie's family was now becoming clear. For Ellie, the fear of going crazy arose when she turned 18 and graduated from his high school. The same fear had been depleting her life, forcing was now leading her towards a self-discovery. The more she studied the genogram, the more connections she began to make. Ellie remembered her mother telling her that she had experienced postpartum depression for the first year of Ellie's life. In her suffering, Ellie's mother was also a recipient of a great-grandmother's trauma. Ellie's mother admitted that, as soon as Ellie was born, she began obsessing that something would go terribly wrong. Specifically, she was terrified that she could inevitably do something and, as a consequence, Ellie would die. Unbearable feeling of dread arose during the pregnancy and intensified after Ellie was born. Ellie's mother never connected the depression to what had happened in her family. What was not talked about consciously in the family was expressed unconsciously through the fears, feeling, and behavior of its member. Now sit back and look at your genogram without focusing too carefully. Let your eyes take in the whole gestalt. Absorb the energy of on both sides of your family. Feel the quality of weight, the lightness or heaviness of the emotions into which you were born. Compare your paternal line with your maternal line. Which side feels weaker? Which side has more burdensome feeling? Look at the traumatic event who suffered from the most difficult fate, who lived the most difficult life. Who did the other family member feel about this person? Who or what was rarely talked about in your family? Don't worry if the information you have is incomplete. Yet let your thoughts, feeling, and body sensation be your guide. Now speak your core sentence out loud. Who in the family would have echoed this similar feeling? Who would have struggled with similar emotion? Chances are your core sentence existed long before you were born. Let's meet Carol, whose core sentence originated with her grandmother. From the time Carol was 11 years old, she had been overweight. As an adult, her weight consistently hovered around 300 pounds. At 38, she was at the top of her weight range. Carol had had very few relationships, had never been married. Carol described feeling smothered and suffocated by her weight and being betrayed by her body. Right away, we hear her core language calling out to be desperate has touched something in her family seeking a resolution. Knowing what we already know about core language, we might ask the bridging questions. Who in the family felt betrayed by her body? Who was smothered? Who was suffocated? Carol went on to explain, I developed early, way before the other girls. I got my period at 11 and began hating my body even back then. I thought my body had betrayed me by developing so early. That's when I began to put on weight. Again, that interesting notion of feeling betrayed by one's body. And no a new clue, Carol felt betrayed by her body, and once it turned into a woman's body, a body that could now create life in its womb. Adding this information to the mix, more bridging questions come to mind. What women in Carol's family felt betrayed by her womb? What terrible thing could happen to Carol if she were to become a woman or get pregnant? All the questions so far have been right on target. We just don't know it yet. Add to mix Carol's worst fear. I will be all alone without anybody, at 300 pounds and isolated from other people. Carol was well on her way to making her worst fear a reality. Now let's put all the pieces together and investigate Carol's core language map. Remember, Carol language started once her womb became fertile. Here are the words she used. The words that from her core language map. Carol's core language map. Carol's core complaint, I feel smothered and suffocated by all this weight. I feel betrayed by my body. Carol's core sentence, I will be all alone without anybody. Carol's bridging questions. Here are the bridging questions that help Carol make the link between the traumatic event in her family and her excessive weight gain. Who is the family felt betrayed by her body? Who was smothered? Who was suffocated? What women in the family felt betrayed by her womb? What terrible thing happened to a woman who got pregnant? Who felt all alone without anybody? Carol's core trauma. Now let's visit the core trauma, the traumatic event, the unresolved tragedy in Carol's family. Her grandmother had 3 children, a boy, Carol's mother, and another boy. Both boys suffocated in the grandmother's birth canal during the delivery, and as a result of severe oxygen deprivation, both boys became mentally handicapped. They lived in the basement of the grandmother's rural Kentucky home for nearly 50 years. The grandmother lived broken-hearted and empty for the rest of her life. Although it was probably never spoken aloud, the sentence "my body betrayed me" clearly belonged to Carol's grandmother. Her grandmother's body had suffocated the babies. She lived alone, surrounded in pain and guilt. The 2 boys who had been smothered by the wage pressing against them also lived all alone in the basement, cut off from the outside world. Carol's mother also felt alone throughout her childhood, describing her mother as there physically but not there emotionally. Carol's core language and her body had inevitably been telling the whole story. Let's revisit it one more again. When Carol became old enough to convince a child, she put on weight and isolated herself from those around her. Staying isolated ensured that she would never become pregnant and suffer as her grandmother had. She lived a solitary life, feeling all alone in her world as her grandmother did in her desolations, as her uncle in the basement did, and as her mother, whose life was riddled with the sadness, did. Carol used the words smothered and suffocated to describe the feeling of being oppressed by her weight, yet this word had a deeper meaning in the context of her family. These were the unspoken words of her family's trauma. They were probably words no one dared say in front of their grandmother. These words, however, will be important for this family's ability to heal from such a horrifically tragic event. Had the grandmother been able to come to terms with the magnitude of their tragedy? Had she been able to grieve her losses without blaming herself and feeling betrayed by her body? Then this family might have had a chance to follow a different path. Carol might not have had to carry the family suffering as a pack on her body. Tragic events like this can shatter the resilience in a family and collapse the wall of support. They can erode the flow of love from parent to child and send our children to drift on a sea of sadness. As with most of us, Carol never made the connection that she was carrying the suffering in her family history. She thought the suffering originated somewhere inside her. She thought something must have been wrong with who she was. Once she understood that the feeling of being betrayed by her body belonged to her grandmother and not to her, Carol was on the path to freedom. As soon as she recognized that she had been absorbing the family suffering for her grandmother, her uncles, her mother, her whole body began to shake. An emotional weight was lifting off, allowing her to inhabit those places inside her that had long been shut down. It wouldn't be long until Carol would gain a physical awareness of her body that would enable her to make different lifestyles